The mics are live and are being recorded. The webinar is now live. Participants are piling in. We're at 35, we're at 42.
We all look very tense, I guess. I guess we look better than the backdrop zombies behind us.
Let's hope so, Aria.
Yeah. Chrissy, I'll let you kick us off. How about that?
Sure.
Okay.
Chrissy, your weapon's free. Let's get going.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you all for joining us today for the Zombie Apocalypse CLE that we're putting on. I want to let everyone know that is participating here today that we are going to accept questions and answers via the Q&A box that you can find on the screen at the bottom. And all the presenters have agreed to take the questions as they come in. I will be the moderator today and be asking the questions as they come in, so bear with us on that. I am speaking today on behalf of the MTLA, so thank you very much. I'm now going to turn this over to Aria E.
Yes, so thanks, Chrissy and Steve, and we are so excited to be able to present to y'all. And Steve, I've already hit a snag in my slideshow, so I don't know if you can advance the slide. If not, I tell you, doesn't matter how many times you work on your tech, and we're going to cover this point. The tech can fail. It must be something I'm doing with the slideshow itself, you know. But in any event, I've got with me here, besides Chrissy Mann, we've got Michelle Felicity from Gage and Felicity, Beth Gage, also from that court reporting services, District 3, District Attorney Andrew Robinson, and pulling up our anchor is Bar Counsel Julia Sheridan. So thanks, y'all. We've got a really robust program for you this afternoon, and just want to start off with a few comments. And we can't even get there. I don't even.
Aria, would
Yeah.
you do me a favor? Let's try one thing first.
Yeah.
Take your mouse and click actually on the screen that has the Zombie Apocalypse slide on it.
There you go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that's why you get paid the big bucks, Steve. So the way that this CLE derives, we've had some feedback from the bench and the bar about what's happening in. Let's go back to the slide. What's happening with in this new the new normal, the business as unusual kind of situation that we found ourselves in 2020, and particularly as it relates to video conferencing platforms. So whether you're using Google Meet, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, whether you're engaging with your own team through Slack or BlueJeans or whatever means y'all are using to keep track of each other and stay connected. One of the things we're finding is that we know this isn't going anywhere. Maine is not immune to this pandemic. We're so fortunate not to have some of the numbers that other states have. But as you know, it's really affected our profession in good ways, I think, and we're going to hear about some of those ways, as well as the more challenging ways. And what we all did is learn very quickly how to up our game technology-wise, to remove our offices into remote or at least hybrid remote environments. And we have all these unique liabilities, challenges that we've all faced. And so one of the things that I think about in considering what this has done with our bar is how it affects you as managers, as business owners, because of course you are business owners, as supervisors, and all of the things that you have to keep track of. And those concerns each day obviously become, I think, more complex and more complicated. So I want to just urge you to draw on your colleagues, particularly in the employment law bar, for help regarding these kinds of issues, running your businesses, as it concerns you as an employer, and also as a supervisor and manager. We have so much content in our 2 slideshows that we're going to knock your socks off, but we didn't include some of the supervisory rules because we'd keep y'all here for 4 hours and it's a Friday afternoon. We're not going to do that because it's like 64 degrees out. But please, despite the fatigue that you may be feeling about the pandemic, about working in a way that perhaps you're less used to, be hyper aware of your ethical responsibilities as a community member, a legal community member, a citizen of our state, and as an owner and a business-minded individual, because that's one of the things that you've got to be concerned about, as well as your employees. So with that, I want to get right to speaking of hyper aware. We've got a new SJC pandemic order that's fairly recent, and I'm going to start that off with Julia and Andy talking about what the highlights of these orders are. Now, I will say this, this is a special courthouse, and at the very end, if you know which courthouse this is, please let me know and put it in the Q&A, and you'll get a special surprise sent to you. All right, go ahead, Julie. What do we need to know about this first, this recent pandemic order?
You're muted, Julia.
Okay, Exhibit A. In any event, the court's been issuing pandemic orders since March, as everybody's probably aware, and they've been dealing with issues as they've come up to protect the public and to protect participants and the staff at the courthouse, the judiciary, everybody. So the latest one is PMO SJC 7. And if you look at these orders, basically they require that everything, the presumption is remote. Everything's going to be conducted remotely, all of the court hearings. If you want to request an in-person proceeding, you have to file a motion in advance, 14 days in advance. You have to show good cause. The opposing party can object. And exhibits have to be filed with the court at least 7 days before trial.
And Julia, you'd agree with me. They did call out some very specific type of hearings that are not going to be remote.
Yes, absolutely. There are, for people who practice in the criminal bar, criminal jury trials are at the top of the list with regard to things that will be conducted first. But I know that grand jury proceedings, for example, in Cumberland County, are conducted in person. There was a great deal of effort put into finding available space to conduct something like that, so you could have the grand jurors seated far enough apart, and so that witnesses could be protected. And plexiglass screens have been put up. There's been a whole lot of effort and work put into pulling this off. But grand jury proceedings are in person. There are a number of things that will be, but the presumption is that things are to be remote.
Yeah, I think I remember also seeing on the civil side, maybe protection from harassment or protection from abuse orders or hearing to be in person. But then they curtailed everything else and made them remote. So it becomes that much more important that you have a good grasp on the technology you need to be able to appear remotely and interact with the other parties, right?
Absolutely. And
it also takes a little bit more preparation because not only do you have to get your exhibits in advance, but you got to share them with the other party in advance too, right, to make sure you're meeting all of those safeguards that we usually have with the rules of evidence and the rules of court.
Hey, Andy, what if somebody doesn't know what a JPEG is?
Yeah, knowing your electronic data file extensions is not something a lot of people learn in law school. That's for sure. And
can you tell us a little bit about that? What these mean? I mean, I think we all know what a PDF is.
Well, and the PDF is a great way to sort of tackle the topic, because I think we all watched the evolution of documents and how we save them and how we distribute them. And it used to be we did something in WordPerfect. We'd save it in WordPerfect and send it out, or we'd print a hard copy. And then eventually PDF became the primary sort of generic format that everybody agreed would be the file extension that we would use to save a document. That is true of other types of media. So a JPEG is a very common format for images. And MP3 is the format for sound, for audio. And then finally, I remember the order also focused on MP4, which is for video, which we get more and more as we're in the world that we live in and we use for evidence. So these are the standard formats, and the court has told us, we want you to use these standardized formats when you're submitting exhibits to the court. So if you have an image and it's on your computer, you want to save that as a JPEG before you submit it to the court. If you have a document you're submitting electronically, it would be a PDF. If you have an audio recording or a sound that you want to use as evidence, MP3. And then finally, for the video, you would want to do MP4. And for anybody who's hearing that and it gives them pause, they're thinking to themselves, geez, I'm not sure what they're talking about. That's the point where you need to reach out to someone around you that does have that information or the ability to help you save your material in the necessary format. Because once you get it down, it's actually pretty easy. But if it's alien to you, then our obligation is to find someone to assist us, right? And make sure that we're complying with the court order and putting the information in a format that will make it so all the other parties can view it and observe it and use it also.
I mean, you may wonder why, how are we getting ethics credit for Andy talking about acronyms to us? It's because this whole competency issue, right? And it's so important right now. We've done a few of these on technology, and you don't want clients saying that you provided ineffective assistance of counsel, whether it's in a family law case or, like a protective custody case or obviously a criminal case, simply because you didn't know how to either ask for leave of court to submit the exhibits, which may actually be denied that request to submit them in any other format, because the court's been very specific about the formats it will accept. So even when you don't know what you're doing, find somebody who does. That's what I yeah.
And Ari, I agree wholeheartedly, because that competency component, I think there's a little tiny part of us that like to throw our hands up in the air and say, oh, come on now. I didn't go to law school to be a software engineer or to learn all these things. But we would all agree that as technology has become more and more, sort of intertwined with our work, we have certain expectations. I think 15, 20 years ago, you could say, I don't do email, send me a hard copy. And now the expectation is everybody is accessible by email in some fashion. What used to be a fax can now be emailed to you.
Right.
And this pandemic has forced us to take much greater strides in the realm of technology. And with that comes an expectation that we're going to educate ourselves to use the technology. And if we're not going to do that, then we're definitely going to bring people into our work to help us meet the criteria. Right. Because it's not enough just to say, oh, come on, I shouldn't have to do that. It's the standard now. You need to know how to be able to log on to Zoom. You need to know how to be able to generate, digital exhibits and share them on your screen. And those things, those expectations are a part of competency now. It's part of the work of an attorney in the state of Maine.
One point I would like to bring up is, I was just going to say, and hopefully the timing is bad. They're doing a lot of yard work outside, so there's a lot of machinery. I'm not sure anybody really can hear that, but in any event, the formats that are required by the court, bear in mind that the court doesn't have unlimited resources, just like you don't and no one does. So it might be that if you submit something, A, the court will reject it, but B, the court might not be able to see it. Or, so if nobody can see your exhibit, you might as well not have it. And if the evidence doesn't get submitted, and heard by the fact finder or the person who's deciding, you know, you might as well not have brought it forward. So it's really important to make sure that you can, you know, have the evidence that it can be reviewed by the court, because the court's going to need to see it.
And in fact, Julia, didn't they say if you're going to deviate from these formats, you need to get special permission from the court to do that?
Yes, absolutely. And I think part and parcel of that is so the court can see it, because they might need to take, you know, extraordinary steps or unusual steps to get the technology available to view it if it's in some unusual format. And if you do that, you spring it at the last minute, you know, the court's not going to appreciate that. They probably won't even accept it.
So I'm going to jump in here. We do
Yeah.
have a question for the panelists, and that is, what actions are acceptable to ensure confidentiality when using email?
Well, in software encryption, but go ahead, Andy.
Well, I was going to say just that, Aria. One, I think there's a specific opinion that was issued on this, and it is about having using encryption software with your email. So if you're sending out information, there is an expectation that it will be encrypted so that if somebody intercepts that email in some fashion, they won't be able to read the content and get access to the sensitive information. That's a great question.
And by opinion, Andy means the Professional Ethics Commission issued an opinion. And I want to say, I think it's 196, but if you just, if you go onto our website, which is where you'd find the tab for ethics opinions, those are the opinions of the Ethics Commission, not of Bar Council or from me at the board. And if you just type into the search box, email or cyber attacks or software or encryption, any of those search words, it'll pull up the relevant commission opinions. The last thing I want to say on this competency issue, particularly as we approach e-filing, and I don't even think we've got e-filing in here, but I know, Andy, you and I have presented before on e-filing issues. But if you're going to bring somebody in to help you and to learn these things, to become competent in using software, in developing your exhibits, those kinds of things, that person, you have to have a backup plan, because right now people are, you know, we're having community transfer of this pandemic. We have a lot of lawyers and staff people being hit unexpectedly by catastrophic illness or those kinds of other issues that may affect your practice, and you don't want to be left unable to advance your client's goals, particularly in a litigation context, because your staff person, your paralegal got COVID and is unavailable to you. So please be sure to have a backup plan. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute when it comes to technology.
Okay, and I'm going to jump in here again because we have another question.
Sure.
This question is, how will the best evidence rule apply if we convert from JPEG image to a PDF before filing? How about exhibit documents scanned into PDF?
Okay. I'm going to cede the floor to one of you two.
Well, one of the things I'd point out is, because you can have a JPEG submitted into evidence, I don't think you need to convert it to PDF. But if you do, you know, I think, you know, the best evidence rule that you always can get an exception to it, right? You have to explain to the court why you're doing it and get permission from the court, or at least explain to all the parties as to why you've changed that format. There are things that when you change format, it loses some information. So I do think this sort of taps into a critical point of why you may ask for an exception to the standard formats if you think it's going to alter the information or change. And I'm thinking about video right now. Sometimes you can get a video in a native format that contains information that's important to what you're trying to show. In my life, that's where there may be a GPS location or a speed. But if you convert it to MP4, it doesn't contain that information in the final video. That would be something where I would say, hey, I would like to present this to the native format. So with regard to the best evidence rule, clearly this is an area where we're going to have to explore it and explain the reasons why we're making the conversion and changing that format, and then let the court tell us which way to go. And then looping back, just so we don't go too far down the path, that encryption email opinion was number 195. So if you're looking for it, that's where you'd find it.
Thank you, Andy. And looping back 2 slides, So I won't tell you the first courthouse, although some of you, I peeked at the Q&A and a few of you got that for sure the last time I peeked. The second courthouse was Cumberland County, and now we're looking at Kennebec. So speaking of court, we do have particular standards of decorum that we need to emphasize here with y'all, including dress and demeanor. And so that's something that I know that the court is wanting us to be mindful of, and we've had our colleagues raise that as well. So in terms of, Julia, for the witnesses, what's required of our witnesses, not us as lawyers? We'll get to us as lawyers in a little bit here, but it seems to be a different standard under this order.
That's correct. The witnesses, there's a specific paragraph in which the court addresses the requirements of a witness. For a witness, you would treat them with the same way with regard to credibility and professionalism. Don't wear your dump clothes. Don't, tell the person to treat the appearance as if it were important, because it is. But this specific paragraph does say that the witness has to be alone in a quiet room. The witness cannot have a virtual background. So we're going to have some discussion of virtual backgrounds here with Andy, who is our virtual background king. But witnesses cannot have those. And the witnesses also have to turn off all electronic devices, except the device, of course, that allows them to participate. They have to specifically refrain from messaging with anybody, text messaging or anything like that while they're testifying, subject to contempt of court. So, I think you don't want, again, people can't be in their car, they can't be, sitting outside with a whole bunch of noise, treat it as if it were in court. This is supposed to be a court appearance. So the court does outline what they expect from witnesses.
And I'll tell you,
Andy,
Julia,
yeah.
this is part of an awareness that I started to sort of sink in as the months went by with the pandemic, and we started having more and more folks testify remotely. And there's some kind of psychological shift that occurs when someone is in their own home, where witnesses, officers that I've relied on are suddenly appearing in front of the camera wearing T-shirts, and bandanas, and had flags in the background that, sort of were distracting and had messaging in and of itself that had nothing to do with the hearing. And so it really is important to talk to your witnesses in advance and explain the importance of keeping a professional appearance, but also having a neutral background when they're testifying. You can't take it for granted. Folks change the way they think about what they're doing based on the fact they're not sitting in a courthouse with all of the, I guess, sort of the austere, furniture, the judge, the presence of all the individuals involved. And so you've got to remind them they're doing the exact same thing. And so it's just as important to present in the same way.
Yeah. And, among all the reasons that y'all said, and we'll skip ahead in a little bit to some of the more specifics about that, is there's still continued public access to the non-confidential proceedings. So the public is still available to see all of this that's going down. And so you want it going down, particularly if you're prosecuting a matter, meaning, you're advancing the matter, it's your burden to prove it. You're the petitioner or the plaintiff or the prosecutor. You want to put on your best case. You want your evidence to come off in the best light, including your witnesses. And of course, there's continued media access according to this order as well. I think we've covered most of the competence. And does anybody want to say anything more about?
Actually, I'm gonna jump in, Aria.
Yeah, go ahead.
A couple questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
What about communicating with your client during a witness's testimony? For example, texting with them.
There you go. It's like you knew my next slide, Chrissy. I'm not sure you did, but thank
I
you.
didn't.
Awesome.
So that question, as well as, will these standards apply to Health Security Act panel hearings? So those are the two questions right now.
I would think with the first question with regard to your client, if your client's not testifying, you can communicate with them the way you would communicate, but then the rules of confidentiality and, competence with regard to the medium of communication come into play. So you want to make sure that however you're communicating, confidentiality is protected, and Obviously, if there's a person is testifying, then the specific, governance of the pandemic order with regard to witnesses would come into play. But certainly, having access to one's attorney is a right that the client has. As long as it's not disruptive to the proceeding in any way.
Right. I mean, we've seen that. I've seen some of those and heard a little bit about them where people aren't understanding, that when they're talking to the attorney, or they might be in a hearing and they're talking really loud instead of using their, their church whispers.
Right.
So we are all catching up. We're certainly all catching up, but in a little bit, we're going to talk about how important preparation, dry runs are. So important to your presentation in the litigation context.
Okay, so maybe we'll circle back to that one, but does anyone have an answer to will these standards apply to the Health Security Act panel hearings?
One, I just love the fact that I am in a presentation where that question is going to be posed. I don't even know if these, I just live in the criminal realm, but are these hearings in the courthouse? Because
Ordinarily, you mean?
Yeah, I don't know where they're held. Is it an administrative hearing or is it a court hearing?
Isn't it an administrative hearing?
To that end, the only thing I would say is that, we're talking about the SJC's order on court proceedings. So to how far it is applied, I don't know that it would apply to an administrative hearing, or at least I would not presume that it does.
I recall hearing Chief Justice Mead talk, now it's, a few months ago, about the court's pandemic orders and their application to administrative hearings. For instance, at the Board of Overseers, we have been conducting some hearings, some grievance commission hearings, and we conducted, I think, a 4-day reinstatement hearing. All of that was via Zoom platform. It was live streamed on YouTube. And it was up to the commission, as I recall Justice Mead saying, it was up to the administrative tribunals how they wanted to handle their hearings. And so the grievance commission at the board for this administrative procedure as a tribunal decided they would be remote. But Chrissy, I don't know if that answer's coming through on Q&A, whether the Health Security Act matters proceed in a courthouse or in another forum, like a true administrative hearing. In fact, the board hearings typically occur at a courthouse, but they are an administrative hearing.
Okay, it hasn't come through, but another question did come up, which is if courts keep digital equity at the forefront, how will they ensure that all participants have access to high-speed internet and devices? Right.
Yeah, and I think there is an accommodation that is made. So if you can't meet, if you can't appear remotely, then you need to explain why, and then get an accommodation by the court to whether it's going to be a live proceeding because you couldn't do it remotely. But there is a method set forth in the order that tells you that you have to submit a motion and explain why it won't work for you. Clearly, there are folks that are just not going to have the internet access that allows them to meet all the requirements of the court. And so, but you have to explain that.
And I would say on that note, if you, as the attorney, as counsel, you need to know who that is in your lineup and make those preparations because you don't want to delay the litigation. And, we had to go with Roadrunner here. I mean, there's just no other choice but him to express the expediting litigation realm. But, we'll come back to that. For pre-hearing, these are the kinds of things that we are trying to have lawyers think about ahead of time. And if your witness or you yourself don't have reliable Wi-Fi, you don't have access, you don't know how to use Zoom, it's up to counsel to get the witnesses there and do the dry run and make sure everybody's ready to go.
And Aria, that's what attorneys were doing already in the courtroom, right?
Right.
I mean, the day before your trial, you were sneaking in and just making sure that the projectors were working the way we expected them to, and that you could find your exhibits and the images on the computer that you knew you were going to admit into evidence, but you wanted to be able to publish to the jury on the wall, and you'd run through all that. So that same exercise is exactly what we're doing with the new tools, which happens to be through, your laptops and your computers now.
Yeah, and one of the other questions is just if that does occur where someone does not have sufficient IT to appear remotely, are you guys seeing or hearing that the courts are allowing in-person witnesses to come into the courthouse?
Well, boy, that's a changing landscape because, I just read an article yesterday where they were effectively shutting down all civil proceedings out of that concern. So we have been in the criminal arena, have been allowed to have witnesses appear remotely, but they have also been allowed to appear in person. In fact, I think it's assumed they're going to appear in person unless you get permission. So the court certainly is prepared to allow witnesses to come in. In the civil arena, they're just plain not having witnesses at all, right? I mean, there are no proceedings. As it gets to the point where if it's going to be the difference between being able for someone to be able to have their hearing, I think you have to approach the court in advance, explain what the issues are, why the person has to appear in person, and try to get permission. So we haven't had it. I certainly couldn't tell you that I've seen it happening, but mainly because there just haven't been any civil proceedings for it to occur within. Well, I guess that's all I have to say about that point. It triggered something else. Oh, the other thing that has happened is witnesses have shown up to court and have not been able to answer the questions to ensure they haven't been exposed to someone with COVID-19, and they have been turned away. So one of the other curveballs that can be thrown to you as you're getting ready for your hearings and your trials is, are your witnesses actually going to be admitted into the courthouse if you have them appear in person? And that, with the ruling in Penobscot County was the state's witnesses couldn't appear, and then the court didn't grant a continuance or allow for a different way for them to testify. So it can be that you're going to be dealing with a lot of curveballs when you're trying to put a hearing together and have live witnesses appear.
And of course, that makes me concerned on lawyers' behalf that, client's going to file a claim against them, malpractice claim or bar complaint because the lawyer, wasn't responsible enough to make sure that everybody, all the witnesses hadn't been exposed to COVID and did have the right technology or those kinds of things. And that's just a lot for lawyers to keep up with, right?
Well, I do think, though, it means when you're prepping your witnesses before your hearing that you ask the same questions, have you been exposed to anybody? Have you been out of the state? All the questions that the judicial marshals are going to be asking. The best you can do is the day before get the answers, right?
Right.
And if there's going to be, the answer in a way that makes you think there's a concern or a problem, then address it in advance and let everybody know what's going on.
You made me think.
Don't ask.
Sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, well,
Okay.
if you haven't asked them in advance, I think that's when it could lead to frustration on the part of the court, and a consequence.
Yeah. You made me think of something, Andy. We have a lot of lawyers. We haven't really talked much about this, but except for a couple of comments in the beginning, but we have a lot of lawyers that were furloughed or terminated because, revenue's down in the firms or, whatever the reason is. Maybe they just decided they're going to not practice law because e-filing's coming and the pandemic and all that, but they're offering themselves as contract attorneys. And this is actually if you find yourself not able to keep up with all of these new duties in the pandemic, you should consider hiring, one of these independent contractors to be essentially, if they're, I know that I've talked to a few of them on the helpline who are offering their services kind of like as a trial assistant lawyer, right? So they could be helpful in these ways that we're talking about in the preparation way. Julia, I'm not sure. I kind of skipped over the confidentiality and the decorum slide because I think we're going to hit it a little bit later too. Is there anything specific
Sure.
that you wanted to talk about with either of those issues before we get into Andy and the virtual background?
No, well, I think just the obvious ones that we've touched on a little bit and we'll go into later, but you just want to make sure with all these new methods, all these new technologies and use of technology that confidentiality being preserved, that you know how to use it, that, you know, the information is going to get where it needs to be, and that, you know, you are complying with all those basic rules of professional responsibility, professional conduct.
Okay, great. So one of the things that came up a few minutes ago was that witnesses can't use virtual backgrounds, but Andy, can lawyers use it? And what do you recall about that? And what if we don't know how to do a virtual background?
Well, and that was one of the things we talked about, right? Is, hey,
Right.
what if folks don't know how to create a background? I said, well, I can walk you through that. So when you're in Zoom, we have, well, let's start from the beginning. First, you got to find a background that you like. And the reason why you would want a background is you can make it so that if you're in an area where things are scattered or distracting, or maybe you just haven't had time to pick up, you can put a background behind you in Zoom that makes it so all they see is the image that you put behind you. And so, you know, first thing you do is you find the image you would like behind you. I think our thoughts were you would get something like a bookshelf, you know, or you would get something like an office area. Then when you find the image you like, all you have to do is put your cursor over it and right click, and you'll see that one of the options that comes up on a little menu is Save Image As. Once you click on that, it then brings up what I think we're all used to seeing, and that's the File Explorer on our computers, and it allows you to save it. You sort of give it a name, and then the most important part about this is you got to remember where you're saving it, because a lot of times we save something to the computer, but we end up putting it in another folder or on the desktop, and it's commingled with thousands of other files, so it's really hard to locate later. But you can put it wherever you like. You just got to remember where you put it.
That in and of itself is a competency issue. That we're keeping track of that stuff.
Well, if you're not going to remember where you saved it, you got to know how to search for it.
That's right.
Then when you bring up Zoom, if you go down to where the camera is at the bottom of the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see there's a little up arrow right next to the video camera. And if you click on that, then it brings up another little menu. And on that menu is video settings. And you click on the video settings. And right on that, when that screen comes up, one of the options is virtual background. And so you click on the virtual background. And that's where it actually, if you had images already saved in Zoom, they would appear right here. But if you want to add the image that you chose, there's a little box with a plus sign on it. So you click on that plus sign. And then it asks you if you want to add a video or if you want to add an image. You can add a video, but right now we're just trying to get that background and keep it professional. So we would add an image. And then you go to where you saved it. That's why it was so important earlier on. Hey, where did I put that thing is going to be the question. And here you just go to where you saved it, the folder you put it in, or if it's sitting on your desktop, you highlight it, you click on it. So it turns it sort of blue around the outline, and then you just click open. And when you do that, it puts the image behind you. And so it gives you a little sample, shows you this is what it's going to look like. And if you're satisfied with that image, then you just click the X. And now you have an image behind you when you're using Zoom. And it cleans up anything that's behind you or anything that might be distracting. And it allows you to have that professional appearance if it's something that you wanted to be able to do.
Yeah,
and
we're
that's
here.
Andy's How to Put Up a Zoom Background 101.
It's
Okay, well,
awesome.
I have to tell you that someone has said over the Q&A, they want to thank you for the comic relief of these photos. They love it.
I think they're awesome too. I enjoyed receiving them yesterday.
And now, and with Andy's Zoom Background 101, if you could just refer to me as Professor Robinson for the rest of the presentation, that's the only cost.
Done and done. you know, that's one of the things that has come up though from the bench side of things is that lawyers, kind of what you said about some of your witnesses, Andy, lawyers have all kinds of things in their background, and we're going to hit a couple of those pictures in a minute. We don't want to do a spoiler alert because a few of them are pretty good. But we talked about pre-hearing and the preparation. Julia, what's most important, or what are the highlights during the hearing? And I've already violated one of them because I'm drinking my water, but I get thirsty when I'm talking so much. I don't do that in court, people, and I would have a much nicer water bottle. I meant to bring a nicer one to this presentation. I'm sorry, I was just running around.
Well, I just unmuted myself. So the first one is you mute yourself if you're not speaking. You know, one thing that does is if you have extraneous noise going on at home, it mutes that. If you have somebody mowing the lawn outside, not everybody has to suffer through that. You know, and then you can't hear, you know, people can't hear what's going on in the proceeding. They can't hear what the witness is testifying to. So you want to make sure you mute yourself. Also, if say perhaps you're sitting with your client 6 feet apart masked and you're both watching some proceeding, you know, you want to be able to talk and say things that are confidential that are not going to be broadcast or recorded in the Zoom proceeding. So, you know, be mindful of what you're saying and whether your mute button is on. You know, I mean, I was going to say that's true in court as well. If you're sitting at counsel table, because, you know, as I recall from all of 2 months ago, you know, there was a good mic system in Cumberland County Courthouse. And so you just want to make sure that, you know, you're being mindful of what you say because it's all being recorded.
Plus, Julia, if you mute yourself and the court is ruling against you or opposing counsel is making an argument you don't agree with, you can just say whatever you want. And you're still going to have kept your composure on the record. So
yeah, no, absolutely, that's true. But you know, you want to be careful that you're only presenting what you want to present. You know, the second point, obviously, dress appropriately. This is court, so treat it like court. You know, dress in your court clothing. No undershirts, no, you know, tank tops or bathing suits or whatever, dump clothes. You know, you're in court and the court expects you to dress that way.
And this is something
ahead.
where keeping just a jacket and a tie or some professional outfit near wherever you have to pop on, because sometimes it's just a question of getting the jacket on before you sit down. I have seen counsel that are clearly surprised by the fact they had to be in court, or, you know, notice didn't come the way they expected, and they jump on and they're wearing, you know, their gardening sweater or something. And if they just had a jacket, a sports coat nearby, they could have popped it on and it wouldn't have been an issue. So
what about devices? There's a lot of chatter about people, you know, so it'd be like me, like this, doing this thing. And, you know, it's clear I'm looking at something else, right? And so I should be paying attention. I mean, besides missing potentially a necessary objection if I'm at counsel table, right?
Right, absolutely. And it's, you know, it's unprofessional. If you were in court, you wouldn't be, you know, texting and doing all this other stuff on the side. It's just unprofessional. And, you know, and you're being viewed by potentially the public if it's a public proceeding, and they're going to see this distracted lawyer who's, you know, being pulled in different directions. So A, it's unprofessional. B, you have the issues of potential violations of confidentiality. You know, whatever you're doing or saying or something could somehow be ending up on the Zoom. And so be mindful of that stuff. You know, you are in court, so you don't want to become distracted, and you want to make sure you put your devices away.
and I would add, you know, when you are logging in and using the Zoom and everybody has their little box, it's easy to forget that other people may see what's going on that screen that's beyond just the people, you know, who are in their boxes. You know, there may be viewers in the courtroom. The folks that are in one of the boxes may be part of the media because they are still public proceedings. And so it's easy to be lulled into a sense of complacency until you inadvertently, you know, appear on the front page, you know, on some important story. And you're wearing, you know, a gardening sweater. You can tell someone wore a gardening sweater.
Well, you know, one of the issues that I have seen both when I was a prosecutor and here is just chit chat. When there is, you know, sort of a downtime or there's a break, people start chit chatting and and sometimes it can verge into talking about the proceeding itself, or talking about one of the parties or a witness, or gee, some lawyer they know or something. It's extremely unprofessional. And if it's a public proceeding, I mean, we've had a reinstatement hearing that was live streamed on YouTube. I mean, the public sees that. So, just be very mindful of that, because it's something that potentially could end up on YouTube, or, on somebody's social, somebody's watching this and they're home and they're recording it because they're just going to do that. And then they put you out there on the internet. So just be mindful of what you're doing.
So we have
And
a
where you
couple-
are. If this is your background, that's a no.
Yep,
And this is a no.
yep.
Can't be participating via your car.
Especially if
And
he's
like you
driving.
Well,
Yeah.
so we have a couple questions. Actually, that's good timing, Aria, because
Good.
I think for Professor Robinson, as he likes to be called now,
Yes.
the virtual backgrounds, there were two questions that came in with trying to clarify that issue. One was, so witnesses can't have virtual backgrounds, but lawyers can. And then the next one was, are virtual backgrounds actually okay? So if you could clarify what the court is looking for and whether that's okay, that would be great.
Yeah, I take it as a given that the court was very careful with its language, and it was very specific to apply no backgrounds for witnesses.
Okay.
So from that, now, there's no Supreme Court justice has come to me and said, and this is what we meant, but I read their order, and it seems to me that their goal was to address witnesses, not a counsel.
And I think
Go
one
ahead.
of their goals too was to encourage counsel to use a virtual background so that we are not seeing this or this.
Mhm.
Because they have seen lawyers doing hearings in their car and in their, studio apartments and those kinds of things. And I mean, we all can't have, multi-million-dollar homes where we have special offices, but we do have to make provisions for having an adequate hearing space so that we appear as professionally as we would if we're in court.
And so going back to the hearings, I think the next two questions are particular to those. What about shutting down your video when it's not your turn? Are there any issues around that?
Good
I
question.
don't think there's an issue doing it beyond it. It's definitely going to make everybody else wonder if you're still there. And so if you're an active participant in a hearing, I think probably there is an expectation that you're going to be viewable and you're going to be engaged in the hearing. And so if you shut down your camera, then nobody really knows the answer to that question. And that may make folks nervous or make them wonder, at least. So that would be my initial response.
Yeah, and if you were in court, you wouldn't get up and, I don't know, you wouldn't like slink down in your chair, right? I don't know. I'd be concerned for the same reason that Andy's talking about. Plus, I would hate for it to be seen as a sign of disrespect to your tribunal, that you're kicking off your video.
Yeah, and actually on that same note, the next question was, what about standing? Is it required because it feels strange to make an argument while seated?
Oh, that's something. I think what I have viewed, I haven't read anything on this, but folks have been seated. There has not been an expectation that you stand when addressing the court. Although when I'm in the courtroom, I do it all day long. So
Right.
I definitely respect why the person would pose this question. I stand when the court enters, so I end up with sort of, like my midsection is in front of the screen, and then I sit down, and then when I actually talk and address the court, I still remain seated. I think that I don't think there's an expectation that you would stand. By the way, there are folks, and I have done it, who set up their computer so they can be standing while they're doing it. I don't think there's anything opposed to that. I actually think it could be more comfortable and depending on how you're spending your day. So.
I
but
stand all the time. So I just think, and I set up my Zoom right now. I'm standing. I have a stand-up desk. I barely sit. But if you're in court, certainly that's something to consider. Good question.
Yeah, I think that's a great question.
Of course, you can't have, speaking of whether you stand or sit, you can't have anybody sitting with you. So the court doesn't want to see any of your pets or your kids. And those of us who have kids, it's not that we dislike children, but you got to make provisions for that ahead of time. And just keep it professional. And we are hopeful to guarantee you Zooming success with these tips. But I think we have about maybe 5, 10, about 5, 8 minutes of question time that we can get to, or we can go right into Beth and Michelle's presentation and take questions at the end. I don't know if there was anything more, Julia, you or Andy wanted to say?
Well, we have been talking about hearings and proceedings.
Right.
Some of the things that we're doing, though, are conferences. And a lot of times what we have found ourselves in a situation where we have to wait our turn. And so lots of people will log in at once and we're just waiting for the court to get to the case that we're actually there for. And then I think it's very appropriate to turn off your camera, mute your microphone, and then just listen for your case. It's like you're sitting, in the courtroom waiting for them to call your case. And then I don't think the expectation is that you have to keep your camera on at that point. You just wait. When they call your case, you'll hear it. You turn on your camera and your mic, participate in the conference. And then if you can leave, or if you have another hearing, you just go dark until your next case is called.
You definitely want to have that mic muted though, right? Because if your
yeah.
client's there with you, man, that can only go south real quick.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay.
And
I think so.
you
So I
don't
was going
wanna
to
get
say
the
exactly that, Andy. Yeah. I mean, if you're on, lists and you're waiting, well, those two things come into play. You can mute your video and, don't be sitting there chatting about what you're seeing, or, I mean, I've heard those things. They're incredibly embarrassing, even just to hear somebody else talking about somebody or a case or some noise in the background. So just be mindful of that. I was going to add a point about virtual backgrounds. I think they're great, but part of your preparation and your competence is prepare beforehand, because if you don't have a lot of bandwidth, I think your virtual background can eat that up. And I have seen people disappear into their background when they don't have enough. It's just not common, but I think if you're on an unstable connection, or you don't have strong internet and you have a virtual background that takes up a lot of that, you can sort of, come in and out like a ghost. So, again, that's part of your preparation and part of your competence is prepare and see what's going to work for you.
Well, although
Yeah.
Julia, you would agree that's kind of cool to be able to.
It depends on what you're trying to do.
All
So
right.
one of the questions is actually, do you all use virtual backgrounds?
I do not use virtual backgrounds when I am appearing in court. I use virtual backgrounds every opportunity I get whenever I am doing a conference, so it's in chambers, or if I am just attending a meeting of some sort. And normally that's just because I'm just trying to show off pictures of my kids, because I think it's proof that I genetically married above myself. But for the most part, when I'm in court, I do not use a virtual background. I kind of, I think that ghosting can be distracting to some extent. But I'm also very careful of what's behind me when I'm doing it also.
Well, I want to be aware of time. We do have a couple more things to get to. One of them is about the email again, and just trying to clarify the issue about encryption. This person's impression from opinion 195 was that lawyers generally do not need to use encrypted email. Is that correct?
Ooh,
That's an older opinion. That's an
Okay.
older opinion. So I would say that I think our advice is that they do need to generally use encrypted email. But Andy, you're more tech savvy than I am, but I
I
can't
would-
imagine it's a bad idea to.
Well, I need to go reread 195 again. I'm telling you here and now, you should be using encrypted email.
Okay.
Especially if your concern is about clients confident, keeping your client's information confidential. It is standard practice. It's available for virtually every form of email platform. So it's readily available. It's the standard industry standard. It is unthinkable to me that you would not be using encrypted email for sensitive information.
I want to say opinion 195 is maybe from 2001. I'm just guessing here.
Hey,
Or it's pretty old. So,
Well, even if it's old, it's still an opinion, but I'm telling you.
no, I know, but I mean,
2020
I don't think email encryption, I don't think it was as, that issue was as settled as it has been in the last, even 5 to 8 years. What you're saying, that it is an industry standard, which I agree, it is an industry standard to use encryption. So to the extent that 195 makes it discretionary, I'd say it should no longer be discretionary.
Okay.
Well, I think that would be our opinion from this presentation.
Yeah.
I also want people to know that some of my favorite songs come from 2001. So not everything that comes out of 2001 should be looked down upon. That's all I'm saying.
Who knows if I'm the right year there, but in any event.
So the
All
next question is about difficulties people are having with notifications from court as to Zoom telephonic conferences. Short notice, like a week or less. And this is how this is written. I asked for clarification, but haven't heard back from this person yet. They're sent by email or only telephonic instead of by mail. Whose responsibility is this for proper notification, especially if missed conference or can't get the client to be available for it?
Well, the notification has to come from the court, and the actual link to the remote hearing or the Zoom meeting or Google Meet, whichever one the court's using at the time, has to come from the court. So that burden is on the court, and they've made that pretty clear in their latest order. But you being responsible for scheduling it appropriately and having everybody that needs to be available, available for the hearing and getting the links, that's on the attorney. And
I agree.
that is a bear. I mean, what the person that tells me you're talking about an experienced, practitioner who has been dealing with the tidal wave of notices that have been coming out of the court lately. It's a lot. It's very mundane and administrative in nature, but that is something that you got to stay on top of. And you are responsible for making sure the folks that need those links are available for those hearings.
Okay.
And that's why we're saying, we don't want to be seeing your name in some context in a complaint to Julia's side of our office or that kind of thing, simply because you didn't take the time to really organize those notices. So please do get some help if you need to.
Great. One person did offer in response to the Health Security Act panel question. The chair of the MedMal panel is listening right now, and she wrote, "I prohibit any recordings except by the court reporter. I allow the witness to text with their attorney if they are not in the same location, but we take a break for them to do so. The hearings are all remote with chair, panel, and parties all separated. Otherwise, we pretty much follow all the court rules," just as an FYI.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
and I think other administrative tribunals are doing the same. So that's good to know. Thank
Okay.
you.
And then for our last question as to this part of the presentation, someone is typing in that this is their first Zoom presentation in which only the presenter actually speaking is visible. Usually all the potential presenters are visible and mute or unmute themselves manually, with participants able to black out themselves and only their name remains visible and or have their little mic icon indicate if they are muted or not. So their question is, when in a Zoom video, if all participants aren't always visible, how can we know if we or our clients are or are not visible and or muted or unmuted? And again, I don't know what device this person is watching this on either. They didn't specify.
Well, you can mute yourself. And if you go down to I'm on a computer, but no matter what device you watch a Zoom on, even an iPhone, you can mute yourself and there's a button, mine are down in the left-hand corner, stop video, and you can click on that, and then you can't see me anymore, and then I unclick it, and then, so you can control your own mute and video.
Great. Well, I don't have any other questions for you all.
Let me
anything
just
else.
chime in that opinion 195 does spend a great deal of time talking about how technology evolves and what's reasonable practice has to do with what's available to the attorneys at the time. And so clearly they do end it by saying you discuss it with your client and then you don't have to use encryption if you determine it's not necessary. in 2020, I think the technology has evolved and everything is so easily available that the standard would be that you would use encryption.
What year is that, Andy, since you got it right there?
It's 2008. My
2008.
my second most favorite music year of the last 20 years.
Okay. Awesome.
Great. Well, thank you all. I think at this point,
Thanks.
given the time, we'll move on
Yeah,
to
thank
Beth
you.
Gage
Thank
and
you.
Michelle Felicetti of Gage and Felicetti Court Reporting, who's going to talk to us all about Zoom depositions, hearings, and meetings. So Beth, are you up first?
I think so.
Okay.
I think we're getting together.
Okay.
You have to take a deposition.
Oh, sorry, 1 second. I skipped ahead. Sorry, Beth.
No problem.
Technical difficulties. Let me get this going for you guys. And Beth's going to start off our presentation. Oh, I did it again. Sorry. I gotta do it. There we go. There it is.
Michelle and I have probably worked with many of you before, but let me introduce ourselves. I am Beth Gage of Gage and Felicetti,
Looking like
Oh my goodness.
and one moment, please.
Yeah, it won't go to the front. We're going to get there though. Okay, we're here.
Thanks, Michelle.
You're welcome.
Michelle and I, we formed a partnership back in 2013, and our main goal was to bring technology to the court reporting industry here in Maine. Michelle loves technology. It terrifies me, but I partnered up with her, and we ventured out into this world and started providing video conferencing and live streaming of testimony. And now we never dreamed of what was going to happen in 2020. So when the COVID hit, our business, pretty much like most people, it was brought to a standstill, especially for the month of April. Michelle did a bunch of research and what would be the best fit for our business. And we thought Zoom Business Class was the right fit. And Michelle took on the task of trying to train us court reporters on the features of Zoom and the different devices, iPhones, what's it going to look like, secure the meeting down, you know, all the things you need, you know, share this exhibit, mark this exhibit. And it took me about 3 minutes to realize I can't do this. I am a court reporter. My main job is I'm the guardian of the record. And this is, you know, I just can't do this. I'm not going to do this. And I'm now going to just go into a little backdrop of, you may not really know what a court reporter, what it's like to be a court reporter. I think people think we're like magic or something. But while it may seem seamless and hardly tasking, our brains are hard at work. And this right here is an excerpt from a deposition of a neuropsychologist. And he is describing the intricacies of the human brain and describing a court reporter's brain. So I'm just going to read just a part of it. Let me just explain what she needs to do. I am speaking, so the information has to come in through her ear, into her temporal lobe, and it has to go log itself into the language center. She has to be able to comprehend what I'm saying. Then it has to get rerouted to the prefrontal cortex where it has to hold. She has to be able to hold the information because, you know, I continuously talk, so she has to hold it. Then she has to analyze it, integrate it, and synthesize it. Then it has to go back to the cerebellum, and she has to be able to execute this. And she has to be able to then convert my words into those little squiggly marks. So she has to convert it into a different language, and the white matter track allows her to reroute all of this information simultaneously without effort. No animal on the planet can do this. And now with the speed that we are facing nowadays, the average speed is about 240 words a minute. And that breaks down to about 4 words a second. I look at my writer It has a speedometer on it, and it's many times I'm over 300. So at 330 words a minute, I am now at 5.5 words a second. This is, although we have our composure and we can't have any visual, this is basically what's going on inside of the court reporter. And now to put these other tasks on it for the Zoom, the record is now suffering because you're heaping all these extra duties onto the court reporter. And while we multitask and we can do many things, our number one job is the guardian of the record. And Michelle, with her technology, is now going to explain why we need another person in the room to facilitate all of these functions.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us. Most of you, I'm sure, have already experienced a Zoom deposition, a Zoom meeting, and there's so many things in the background if you're not the one setting it up that's happening. The first thing that's most important to us, and I'm assuming, you know, to everyone, it really is security. You know, walking down the meeting, before Zoom really developed, we all heard about Zoom bombing and the things were happening with the school kids and, you know, people coming in and Zoom bombing the classes. And as Zoom stepped up their security, they came down with lockdown. And now we have the great advent of waiting rooms as well. So we know who we're letting in the room. And then the rooms can go into lockdown where no one can enter that room. Granted, if you have a hacker who's good enough to get into a government website, they're going to get into your meeting, whether you are in lockdown or a waiting room. The other interesting factor that people don't realize that Zoom started letting people have control of, where is your data routing through? In the innards of a Zoom, your Zoom account is where the data is routing through. It's going through Russia, Iran, Iraq, Australia, United States, China, Japan. These are all enabled unless you go in and disable them. So you have to trust the person that's also setting up your Zoom. Do they have these where you want your data to route through? If you're in a confidentiality deposition, do you want your data routing everywhere? That's something that you want to know your person has control over, where they're letting things go through. Chatting in the Zoom rooms, know what's being allowed. Can people chat privately? Is it chatting for everyone? We've had examples where we only allow open chatting for everyone. The only person you can privately chat is the host. These chats also get saved. And that's one of the reasons that we at Gage and Felicetti do not allow private chatting, because we don't want to have a record of private conversations that may be happening. We have had, unfortunately, a witness chatting his lawyer openly during a deposition, and my technician, I wasn't on the job, but called me and said, "What do I do?" So we quickly called the lawyer's office to let him know his witness was chatting him things in the chat box that he probably wouldn't want the other side to know, and they were able to address that. But these are things that you need to be aware of going in. What is enabled in that room? Talk to whoever set up the room, and they'll be able to help you understand that. Are your exhibits uploaded securely? Are they somewhere where when you go to share, they're not seeing everything on your computer, where only just the document you want shown is being shared? And that's another thing for security that's important. Sometimes you don't want someone to see the 46 exhibits you have that you want to show. You just want them to see the one that you call out to be put up or that you're going to share. And it's knowing how to do that appropriately. Different views, I'm sure you've all experienced this. You can do gallery or speaker view, which is usually, especially on a computer, in your upper right-hand corner. You can change that. When we do depositions, we have our technician pin or spotlight a witness so they're nice and big on the screen and everyone can see them. But the host does that. You still can change your own view and it doesn't change anyone else's. So if you want to see the gallery view versus seeing just a person pinned, you can change that back yourself, and it doesn't affect anyone else's view but your own. Annotation or whiteboard drawing, I'm sure we've all experienced this, or maybe we haven't. Documents can be brought up on the screen and you can ask the witness or your technician to draw a circle, draw an X in whatever color you want. The thing to understand about annotations is it's actually just a mark on the screen and not technically on the document. So when we save an annotation, it's saved as a JPEG. And you're going to see the little strip of videos on the side as well, the people showing it's exactly like a screenshot. It's not a mark truly on the document like if we were in person. Whiteboard drawing is just like a whiteboard, and you can draw on it, and that's more the same thing, but they're stay on that whiteboard and you can save it that way as well. Let's see, recording of Zoom. This is a hot topic for court reporters and lawyers alike, and there's been a lot of back and forth about this since Zoom has really become the main way we're all gathering and doing depositions. Gallery view versus speaker view. Zoom can record in both of those, where you see the whole panel, or just speaker by speaker as they pop up. When does Zoom record and who should be doing it is also a big topic. We go by the standard that if it's noticed in the deposition notice, then we will record, as long as all parties see that it was noticed that way. If it wasn't noticed that way and we're asked to do it live on the job, everyone has to be in agreement to do that. We do it because it's not the reporter doing it at our firm. Per Rule 28 and our National Court Reporter Association standards, the court reporter should not be playing both role of videographer and reporter. It's something that we're not allowed to do. Where to record the meeting and why is also another important factor. Hi, Chrissy, did you have a question? Good? Okay. If you record the meeting—
We're good still, but I did want to remind people that if they wanted to ask questions during your presentation, that they could feel free to do so.
Thanks. So you can record your deposition either to the cloud or to your computer. And those are both important things to know, because if you want just the pinned witness recorded, you must record to your computer. So make sure you have enough hard space on your hard drive, because these videos do eat up a chunk. If it goes to the cloud, it's going to record in the speaker view and gallery view, and that's all you get. You can't just do the pinned witness. Then we're going to go on to, this leads us to who's paying attention during this time. Have you gone offline? Are you frozen? Are you locked out? Maybe it's during your critical questioning, your court reporter drops off and you don't even know it, or she's frozen and she's gone and no one knows. We had that happen early on. We had a reporter fall off for about 10-15 minutes. And she missed all the testimony and no one knew. And this is before Beth and I came up with the technicians that now are in all of our jobs. There's nothing worse, I don't think, as a reporter, knowing that you missed testimony, and then if it was a critical point for you, where when you have to re-ask it, the answer is different than what you heard when the reporter was not on record. That would be something we would, that it would not be a good circumstance for anyone. So with who's paying attention, that's where Beth and I really believe that in these, the new world of Zoom, we need to have a technician. We're all overwhelmed. We want the old normal of being in person and seeing each other and what we're used to, and we don't have that anymore. So our solution was the virtual meeting technicians, and they can do depositions, meetings, trials, arbitrations and hearings, webinars. And here's a little video our head technician made up for us.
You have to take a deposition, but instead of looking like this, it looks a little more like this. And you're really good at your job, but law school didn't prepare you to deal with all of this. That's where we come in. At Technica VMT, we specialize in making your remote depositions easy. Our technicians are trained by a nationally certified court reporter. We take care of everything digital so that you can focus on everything legal. This includes hosting the meeting, providing technical support, and handling electronic exhibits. We also provide complimentary Box.com folders to make file sharing a breeze. Our meetings are password protected and as secure as possible. Want a private conversation with your client? We'll set up a private breakout room in an instant. With Technica VMT, you take your depo, we'll handle the rest. You have to take a deposition.
There we go. So
that prompted some questions, Michelle.
Okay.
We have about 3 pending. So I'm just one is kind of before you started with Technica, but one of the questions was just whether if your video has been pinned.
In the upper, if we're not in a setting where I can show you, but in the upper right-hand corner of a person's picture, when you're in a webinar, it doesn't work that way, but when you're in a regular Zoom, there's 3 little dots at the top of, like, say, for instance, your profile picture that you're looking at. When you click on those dots, that's where you'll see an option to rename yourself, pin or spotlight a witness. And when that happens, it'll actually at the top, kind of in a very light white, say video is spotlighted or video is pinned. So you'll actually be able to see that it's you that's being pinned. Also, if you are pinned, you show up nice and big on the screen. You'll actually see that same thing. If someone pins or spotlights your video, you're going to be the main person on the screen and everyone's in little tiles above.
Okay, great. The next question is whether there's a contractual obligation of a court reporter service to lock down the Zoom room.
In May, there probably isn't that we've been instructed. We do that for our jobs because that's how we proceed. You could ask your reporter to lock it down. It's a very easy thing to do. It's just a click of the mouse. But that's something you should know, whether it's being locked down or not. You know, these are important things. These are secure meetings that should be happening where everyone feels the privacy is being respected and that no one can get in the room. Again, if they're a really good hacker and they're just playing around for fun, they're going to get in. But this entering numbers and entering codes that was happening before where people were popping in, they can't do that when you're on lockdown.
Okay. Then are court reporters providing the tech help per standard on depots, or is that the lawyer's responsibility?
Again, it's also the Wild West right now. Everyone's figuring this out. Beth and I, again, for 7 years had already been kind of high tech doing video conferencing and sharing stuff virtually beforehand. And we just had to step it up a notch for when Zoom and the pandemic hit. We had the technicians there because, again, as a reporter, you can't, you know, can you do this? You're taking your hands off your machine to come up and do something. You're delaying the proceeding. There's no obligation that you have to have a technician, but you can ask, you know, it could be either way, that you tell your reporter you want a technician, or the law firm can hire the technician who would be the one setting up the whole meeting and work hand in hand with the attorneys of how the exhibits are going to be shared, where they're coming from. Again, we train our technicians to follow our National Court Reporter Association guidelines of ethics as far as confidentiality and how to proceed in a deposition in the same manner as a court reporter does. Great.
There's a lot. Oh, sorry, Beth, go ahead.
I was just going to add something. So the technicians, they're of course incredibly helpful if it's a large case with multiple attorneys, many exhibits. And we appreciate that you probably have been loyal to a particular court reporter for decades. And hey, I want to use this particular court reporter. You don't need our court reporters. This is a totally new branch to help with you. Just the law firm, the attorney can call up, anyone can call up, and the other court reporter can call up and say, hey, I need a technician for Wednesday. It looks like from 12 to 10 for this particular deposition. And then we just take it from, the technician will then handle it. So I just wanted to make sure it's clear. This isn't like a package deal that you have to go through Gage and Felicetti. We are just, we formed this to help attorneys, to help other court reporters actually, and we are starting to be reached out from other states across the country because of this service. Okay.
Yeah,
thank you.
No, I think that's super helpful and important to point out to everyone. So that's great. We have a couple of security issues. One where people are, talking about whether the GoToMeetings is more secure than Zoom. This particular person said that they find Zoom much easier, but do you know of any security difference between Microsoft Meetings and Zoom?
There is no, thus far, there is no lockdown on Microsoft Teams. I do know that. Whether GoToMeeting has created one or not yet, I have not seen. Again, I think early on when everyone was afraid to use Zoom because of the Zoom bombings and things that were happening, Zoom really stepped up to the plate and really in our in our world became the gold standard to use Zoom. GoToMeeting's fine, WebEx is fine, BlueJeans is fine. And it's really what platform works for you. But we do find for documents and for bringing people together and the features that Zoom has, it really is the best platform for performing these things. And like the technicians are there even before the depot, they're there to help your client. You call them up, say, can you test with my client? Can you make sure their connection is okay? We've had to have a technician call a person who call the meeting and then merge a person in through the call to get them in for us to proceed. We've done everything we can to make sure our job goes forward because everyone's time is valuable. And that's the other, appropriate thing with this is that every time you ask the reporter to take their hands off their machine, you are delaying. It can add a lot of time to a depot.
And what about Google Meet? Any feedback on that and the security?
It's not so much security that we get feedback on. We keep our pulse on what's going on out there. And what we find is with GoToMeetings, WebEx, and even live litigation, they really have a lot of trouble staying connected. There's a lot of drop-offs. There's a lot of audio issues. One of the things that we keep track of, we got a notification this week. This was a bad week to use any of the Zoom dial-in numbers. Most people say use the video and then dial in on a phone line for the audio. And that does work if you have a poor connection or poor quality of internet at your home or your client does. But this week in particular, Zoom alerted us, do not use the dial-in numbers. You're probably not going to connect. So these are things as, a company that specializes in this, we're now making sure we know by week, day by day, what's going on. Our people attend webinars to keep track of what's going on, to give the best service of what is out there. Because there's a lot. There's a lot to keep track of.
Yeah. And I think that ties in with the next question, which is someone that's been having problems with the Zoom app for Chrome, specifically, where they could not be heard through the mic. They've been told that the version of the app is defective. And do you have any thoughts as to the best way to access Zoom app via browser, Firefox, Chrome, or other, or download program, which they understand presents some sort of security hazards there?
It does depend what your company allows. We had one person that they were only allowed to use the browser version. When you do that, you can't pin a video, you can't do certain things. There's certain features that are not allowed when you're just on browser. So it's knowing what you want during the meeting, whether you just want to attend and listen, or that you need some of those features. If the app is corrupt, uninstalling and reinstalling it would be a way to go, to try that way and see if that works. I use Firefox. It's just a preference for me. I know Microsoft Edge could be a little funky with Zoom sometimes. So it really depends on your computer system, what you're allowed. And if the microphone wasn't working, that still could also be a computer issue, depending who's telling them that that's the issue.
Great. I think that's all the questions right now.
All right. So again, we use Box for our document exchange. It's actually the same service that the government uses to exchange documents. It's highly secure, HIPAA compliant. It's drag and drop to put stuff in there. So it's like Dropbox, but a more secure platform. We will issue a box to each attorney individually. If they want a shared box between both sides, we can do that as well. We've done that. And this is a place to put all your documents. The technicians only bring up the one that you call out and nothing else. And you won't see anything else that's in that box, but the document you want to see at that moment. And then as we're going on, the technicians also mark them with a sticker, whatever number you want it to be, and get those to the reporter after the job is over. And again, we talked about the recording of the session. In this case, where we have the technicians doing it, they're a third party. It's not the reporter. That's where we allow the recordings in Zoom. If someone just wants it recorded plain Jane, we don't go on and off the record. We have videographers for that. But some people just want the Zoom recorded, and we do that with our technicians because it's not the reporter doing it. With the caveat knowing it's not usable for court because it's literally everything. If you're in there and talking while you're off the record, that's recorded. So that would not be a usable format of video for court. We do have videographers that we still use in the virtual world that can create your video, sync it, and do all the normal duties through Zoom. to have your video for court. One of the things that was talked about a lot here, and it's a service Beth and I are offering, we have 3 offices. We have one in Portland, one in Auburn, and one in Bangor. We have sometimes witnesses who don't have internet, don't have an iPad, don't have a computer, come to our office, and because everyone else can still be remote, we set them up with a laptop, have them come in there by themselves in the room, and we're able to offer that service of letting them connect with the laptop or the iPad at one of our offices, whilst everyone is still remotely distanced in their places, in their homes, and go forward that way. So we've been able to help, witnesses that can't connect or don't have that technology still attend a depo or a proceeding.
And have you ever had to use the captioning feature on Zoom for participants that are hard of hearing, for example?
We have not used that one yet. We actually can, and this is another thing we can do as reporters. We can actually do real time through Zoom. There's a way to set that up in advance where our real time feed can come through on the screen. The captioning feature is still a little bit in beta testing right now, kind of like some of the other features I was kidding about earlier with smoothing your appearance out. They have a beta testing for lipstick and eyebrows now for Zoom. It's kind of funny. So the captioning the same way. It's beta testing. It's good. And it can be enabled. We haven't been asked to do that yet. We have been asked to do real-time streaming to attorneys offsite, so they're getting our live stream. And then one of the things that Chrissy, when we were all getting together to talk about this, we were talking about how to change your view. If you have the big document displayed in front of you and everyone's teeny tiny little panels on the side, and you're like, I wish I could see more of the people's faces and less of the document. At the top of your screen, this is where you can go to side-by-side mode. And when you do that, the little box with kind of looks like a little highway here shows up. And if you hover on the little arrow there, you can drag and change the size of your screen to be able to increase the size of the document you're seeing or increase the size of the people you're seeing. And the other thing that we talked about was, again, this is how you can pin a witness. This is your options here.
This is
So
awesome, Michelle.
That was something we talked about, so that way you know how to do it. And again, it's usually the 3 little dots right at the top of the corner of the thumbnail you're looking at gives you those options so that you can have the view you want. It really can be personalized so much. And we had 2 attorneys kind enough to give us reviews on our technicians and our services. And, it was, one of them told us it's as close to in person as he's experienced so far. And that was really a great compliment to us. We do aim to hopefully make it feel like you're in person. We're all living the same life right now, and it is a day by day. And then one of our other attorneys, he praised one of our technicians about, the document presentation. He had, I think there was 114 exhibits that were being presented, and that's a lot. And again, for a reporter to do that would exponentially increase your time on a job. Our technicians can work with the lawyers or the witnesses in advance and doing the documents and showing how it's presented and how it's going to look. So they're there to help you. They're there to guide you through the process, and whatever you need, meet in advance, work with you on the job. It's, that's what we do. It's trying to make your job easier. And the reporters, as Beth said, we're reporters and our brains are already on fire to begin with to do what we do. And then we kind of exploded when we were expected to do A, B, and C, and hey, throw me in a breakout room. It's like, okay. So it was a lot to take on. And that's basically it that we have.
I can't resist because Professor Robinson was so insistent about songs and melodies that I have to make sure that everybody is aware of the Holderness family. I think they're on YouTube or Facebook, but I can't remember which platform. But in any event, he's got a new song out that's called 2020 is a Dumpster Fire. And it made me think of it, Michelle, when you said that. So check it out. It's pretty funny. It tracks the Billy Joel song. So for all you Billy Joel fans out there, I'm one of them. It's kind of funny, and it's a good way to laugh at 2020, which honestly,
It is. We all laugh and say the coin phrase for the court reporting world is "you're on mute," because it never fails. You're like, can't hear you. You're on mute, and that's what we do every time. Which is why one of the things we have a little read on we do when we start. We ask you to raise your hand when you're objecting, so we actually see you're saying something. Because when
Right.
someone is spotlighted, you don't always see them. And also, if you're frozen or your audio is delayed, we don't hear your objection if someone's talking over you. So a little signal of the hand for the reporter that you're talking, if you're not the lead questioner, is really important for us to see that, because someone will say, "Did you get my objection?" I'm like, "Didn't hear you." If the witness is answering, I'm not going to hear you. That's one of the biggest drawbacks as a reporter in the Zoom world. But again, we've had reporters fall off, and our technician quickly pops on, is like, "The reporter fell off," or "someone fell off," because they hear a little ding when someone falls off, and they quickly bring things to a halt to get everyone back in line. And that's one of the things that happens at the beginning too, is we give out an email and a cell phone to the technician. So if you need your assistant to email documents during the middle of the job or drop them into Box, this is all live. Everything's happening live. Everything's there for you. And you're not having to stop and ask the reporter to do anything or take a break. Your assistant can be in contact with someone that's in the background the whole time.
cool.
Great, that's awesome. I don't see any questions and answers, but that was super informative, and I'm so thankful to all of you for participating today. But I did want to announce that the answer to the courthouse question at the beginning was Saginaw, and the first person to answer that correctly was Heather Staples. So for those of you that are paying attention to that, Heather, congratulations.
Yes, Heather. You'll get
On
some
behalf of the
fancy
MTLA
swag.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Apparently, I didn't want to promise anything, Aria. I don't know what you said.
Yeah, well, you're delivering it. Not season.
But at least on behalf of the MTLA, I'd like to thank everyone for coming today, and especially Aria for asking us to co-host this event with the Board of Bar Overseers. We appreciate it. I know you got a lofty goal from the SJC telling you to tell us all how to be professional in this
Right.
Zombie apocalypse that we find ourselves in, but I really appreciate it. And it looks like we're getting lots of really great feedback, and I think everyone here that has attended has been chatting or sending messages saying that's been an excellent webinar. And I think
Great.
at this point where we're all really kind of zoomed out sometimes, I think we've all kind of lost track of some of the
Right.
things and the details and the way that really Zoom could help us do our jobs even better.
This turned out to be a great kind of like Zoomapalooza too, because we added the Maine Prosecutors Association and then Gage and Felicity. So thank you very much. It was a great
Yeah.
partnership. It was a lot
Great.
of fun.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having
Felicetti,
me.
Felicetti, sorry, Michelle.
Felicetti. Close enough. I answered anything now.
Hey,
No, we appreciate being a part of this. It was,
Yes, thank
we
you.
learned a lot from you too. That was a fantastic presentation.
Great.
all
Thank
right.
you all so much.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank
All right.
you.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Enjoy the weekend.
Bye.
Bye-bye.